The message arrived at exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time. It came through every channel at once. Radio, quantum link, even the old emergency frequencies that nobody used anymore. Someone wanted to make sure humanity received it. Captain Ken Taiho was sleeping when his personal communicator began to scream. He opened his eyes slowly, stared at the ceiling of his small cabin, and knew immediately that something was wrong. In his 30 years of service, he had learned to trust that feeling in his gut. It had saved his life more times than he could count. He sat up and answered the call. The face of Admiral Seo Jina appeared on the screen. She looked tired. More than tired. She looked like someone who had just received very bad news and now had to pass it on to someone else. Captain Kang, she said, I apologize for waking you. You did not wake me, Admiral. Taiho lied. What has happened? The Admiral paused for a moment. Behind her, Taiho could see other officers moving quickly. Papers were being passed. Voices were raised. Whatever this was, it had already set the entire command structure on fire. The Galactic Tribunal has issued a formal summons, the Admiral said. Earth has been charged with 17 violations of the Universal Compliance Accord. We have been ordered to send a delegation to the Grand Assembly within 30 standard days. Taiho felt his jaw tighten, but his face showed nothing. He had learned long ago to hide his emotions. What are the charges? Everything, the Admiral replied. Unauthorized weapons development, failure to submit to inspections, cultural contamination of younger species, operating outside our designated expansion corridors. They've been collecting these charges for years, Captain. They were just waiting for the right moment to use them. Taiho understood. Earth had joined the galactic community only 12 years ago. In that short time, humanity had grown faster than anyone expected. They had built ships, established colonies, made friends with species that the elder races considered beneath their notice. And they had refused, again and again, to bow. The elder species did not like that. They did not like it at all. What do you need from me? Taiho asked. Your ship, the Admiral said. The Endurance will escort our diplomatic delegation to the Assembly World. Ambassador Li Minji will lead the mission. You will provide security and transport. Taiho nodded. The Endurance was not the largest ship in Earth's fleet, but it was one of the fastest and most capable. More importantly, it had a reputation. During the Holotide War 3 years ago, the Endurance had held a defensive position for 11 days against an enemy force 10 times its size. Other species knew that name. They respected it, or feared it. Sometimes those two things were the same. I will prepare my crew, Taiho said. There is one more thing, the Admiral added. Her voice dropped lower. This tribunal is not what it appears to be. Our intelligence suggests that the verdict has already been decided. The elder species want to place Earth under something called guidance protocols. It would make us a protectorate. We would lose our sovereignty. Our military would be disbanded. Our expansion would be frozen. They want to put us in a cage, Taiho said quietly. Yes, the Admiral met his eyes through the screen. Your job is to make sure that does not happen. Whatever it takes, Captain. Whatever it takes. The call ended. Taiho sat in the darkness for a long moment, thinking. Then he stood up and began to dress. The next morning, the crew of the Endurance gathered in the main briefing room. There were 47 of them in total. Engineers, pilots, weapons specialists, medical officers. Each one had been handpicked by Taiho over the years. He trusted them with his life. Lieutenant Park Yuna stood at the front of the room, a display screen glowing behind her. She was young for her rank, only 32, but she had earned her position through skill and courage. During the Holotide War, She had personally piloted a rescue shuttle into enemy fire to save 16 wounded soldiers. She still carried a scar on her left arm from that day. "Listen carefully," Yuna said to the assembled crew. "Our mission is to escort Ambassador Li Minji to the Grand Assembly on the capital world. Travel time is approximately 18 days. During that time, we will maintain full combat readiness." A hand went up. It belonged to Officer B. Kana, the ship's communications specialist. She was small and quiet, but her mind was sharp as a blade. "Lieutenant, what exactly are we expecting?" Yuna glanced at Taiho, who stood in the back of the room with his arms crossed. He gave her a small nod. "We are expecting trouble," Yuna said honestly. "The Galactic Tribunal has charged Earth with multiple violations. Many species will be watching us. Some of them do not want us to succeed. We must be prepared for anything." The crew absorbed this news in silence. They were professionals. They did not panic. But Taiho could see the tension in their shoulders, the tightness around their eyes. They understood what was at stake. Later that day, Ambassador Li Minji arrived at the docking port. She was a tall woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a simple style. Her face was calm and unreadable. Before becoming a diplomat, she had been a military strategist. She had planned campaigns, won wars. She was not someone who frightened easily. Her aide, a young man named Cho Sanho, followed close behind her. He carried several cases of documents and diplomatic materials. His eyes were wide as he looked around the military vessel. This was clearly his first time on a warship. Taiho met them at the airlock. He bowed slightly in greeting. "Ambassador Li, welcome aboard the Endurance. Captain Kang." Minji studied him for a moment. "I have read your service record. Impressive. You have a habit of surviving situations that should have killed you." "I have a good crew." Taiho replied simply, "You will need them." Minji's voice dropped lower so only he could hear. "The elder species have been planning this for years. They see humanity as a threat, not because we are strong, but because we are unpredictable. They cannot control us, and that terrifies them. What do they want? They want us quiet, obedient. They want us to accept their rules and stay in our corner of the galaxy like good children." A thin smile crossed her face. "I do not intend to give them what they want." Taiho felt a spark of respect for this woman. She had fire in her. "Neither do I." The Endurance launched 6 hours later. As the ship entered hyperspace, Taiho stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. In his hand, he held a datapad containing all 17 charges against Earth. He read them slowly, one by one. Weapons development, expansion violations, cultural contamination. The words were carefully chosen, designed to make humanity sound dangerous and irresponsible. But as Taiho read deeper, he noticed something. A pattern. A gap in their logic. The elder species had made a mistake. They had been so focused on building their case against Earth that they had forgotten something important. They had forgotten what humanity was actually capable of. Taiho smiled faintly and put the datapad away. He said nothing to anyone. Not yet. But when the time came, he would remind them. He would remind them all. The assembly world appeared in the viewport like a jewel floating in darkness. It was massive, 3 times the size of Earth, covered in cities that glowed with golden light. Orbital stations circled it like moons, each one larger than any structure humanity had ever built. Ships from 1,000 different species moved through the space around it, coming and going like insects around a hive. Lieutenant Park Yuna stood beside Captain Taiho on the bridge, her eyes wide despite herself. "I knew it would be big," she said quietly. "But this is where they make the rules," Taiho replied. "This is where they decide who matters and who does not." The Endurance received docking instructions and began its approach. As they drew closer, Taiho noticed that several other ships were keeping their distance. A Veluxi cruiser changed course to avoid passing near them. A Dralith transport shut off its running lights, as if trying to become invisible. "They are afraid of us," Officer Bikana observed from her communication station. "I am picking up chatter on the open channels. They are calling us the violent ones, the dangerous species." "Let them talk," Taiho said calmly. "Words cannot hurt us." The ship docked without incident, though Taiho noticed that they had been assigned a berth far from the main terminal. It was a small insult, designed to remind them of their place. He said nothing about it. Ambassador Li Minji gathered her delegation in the cargo bay. Besides herself and Cho Saiho, there were 3 other diplomats, 2 legal experts, and a cultural advisor. They looked nervous but determined. "The Grand Chamber awaits," Minji said. "Remember why we are here. We are not begging for mercy. We are defending our right to exist as a free species. Stand tall. Speak clearly. Do not let them see your fear." The group walked through the station corridors toward the Grand Chamber. Captain Taiho and Lieutenant Yuna accompanied them as military observers. They were not allowed to speak during the proceedings, but their presence sent a message of its own. The Grand Chamber was beyond anything Taiho had imagined. It was a vast circular room, large enough to hold a small city. Thousands of seats rose in tiers around the central platform, each section marked with the symbols of different species. Light poured down from a ceiling so high it seemed to touch the stars themselves, and everywhere. Aliens watched them. The E3 sat in the highest section, their bodies tall and thin, wrapped in robes of flowing silver. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 9,000 years. Their eyes followed the human delegation with cold interest. The Veluxi occupied another section, their scaled bodies reflecting the light. They were warriors, proud and fierce, but they had bent the knee to the elder species long ago. The Dralith floated in suspension tanks, their soft bodies pulsing with bioluminescent light. They were scientists and engineers, responsible for much of the galaxy's technology. They looked at the humans the way a person might look at a bug, and there were hundreds of others. Species that Taiho had never seen before. Species that had been part of the galactic community for thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. The human delegation was directed to a small platform near the floor of the chamber. It was marked with a symbol that Taiho did not recognize. "Species under review," Cho Sunho whispered, his face pale. "That is what the symbol means. We are being judged." Ambassador Li said nothing. She simply took her position and waited. A deep tone echoed through the chamber, silencing all conversation. At the highest point of the room, a figure appeared. The High Arbiter was ancient beyond measure, a being of crystalline structure that seemed to glow from within. No one knew how old the Arbiter was. Some said had been present at the founding of the galactic community itself. "This tribunal is now in session," the Arbiter announced. Its voice was not loud, but it filled every corner of the chamber. "The species known as humanity stands accused of 17 violations of the Universal Compliance Accord. The charges will now be read." For the next 2 hours, Taiho listened as the charges were presented. Weapons development. Expansion beyond permitted boundaries. Teaching dangerous philosophies to younger species. Refusing to submit to inspection. Each charge was described in careful detail, supported by evidence and testimony. When the reading was complete, Ambassador Li was given the opportunity to respond. She stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "Honored Arbiter, members of the Assembly," she began. "Earth acknowledges that we are a young species. We have been part of this community for only 12 years. But in that time, we have contributed much. We have shared technology. We have built alliances. We have defended those who could not defend themselves." She paused, letting her words settle. "Many of the charges against us are based on misunderstanding. Our weapons development program was created in response to genuine threats. The Holotide War proved that those threats were real. Our expansion was necessary to find resources for a growing population. And as for teaching dangerous philosophies," a thin smile crossed her face, "we taught the Ruvari how to defend themselves. We taught them that they did not have to accept domination." "Is that truly a crime?" Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others shook their heads in disapproval. But then Delegate Corvin of the E3 rose to speak. He was tall, even for his species, and his silver robes flowed around him like liquid metal. His voice was smooth and confident. "The human ambassador speaks well," he said. "But words cannot hide the truth. Humanity is a violent species. Their history is written in blood, wars, genocides, destruction of their own world. They've been part of our community for only 12 years, and already they spread like a disease." He turned to face the full assembly. "I have watched them carefully. They do not follow rules. They do not respect traditions. They take what they want and call it progress. If we do not act now, they will grow beyond our ability to control them." His next words fell like stones. "I propose that Earth be placed under a guardian council. Their military will be disbanded. Their expansion will be frozen. They will submit to guidance for the next 500 years, until they prove themselves worthy of independence." The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others protested. But Taiho could see, with terrible clarity, that the majority were nodding their heads in agreement. He looked at Ambassador Li. Her face was calm, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. She had not expected the opposition to be this strong. Captain Taiho remained silent in the observer gallery, watching everything. He saw the Arbiter lean forward with interest at Carvin's proposal. He saw the Veluxi and Dralith exchange meaningful glances. He saw smaller species shrink back in their seats, afraid to speak against the elder races. The trap had been set long before they arrived. This tribunal was not about justice. It was about power. It was about keeping humanity small and weak and obedient. Taiho's hands curled into fists at his sides. But his face remained calm, peaceful, patient. His time would come, but not yet. The days that followed were brutal. Species after species rose to speak against humanity. They came with evidence. They came with recordings. They came with stories that painted humans as monsters, as beasts, as creatures too dangerous to be trusted with freedom. The Veluxi were first. Their delegate, a scarred warrior named Dreth, stood before the assembly and displayed images of Earth's weapons. Nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, ships designed purely for destruction. "Look at these machines," Dreth growled. "Look at what the humans build. They've been part of the galactic community for only 12 years, and already their weapons rival those of species 10 times their age. They say it is for defense, but we know better. These are tools of conquest." The images changed. Now they showed Earth's colonies, mining stations, outposts on distant worlds. The expansion was mapped out in glowing lines, spreading across the galaxy like cracks in glass. "They do not stay where they are told," Dreth continued. "They push. They grow. They take. And when we ask them to stop, they smile and nod and continue anyway. This is not a species that can be trusted. This is a species that must be contained." The assembly murmured in agreement. Ambassador Li requested permission to respond, but the Arbiter denied her. "The prosecution will complete its presentation before the defense may speak." The Dralith came next. They did not have a single delegate. Instead, their entire section spoke as one, their voices merging into a strange harmony. "We have studied human history," they said. "We have examined their records, their stories, their memories. What we found disturbed us deeply." The chamber darkened. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing images from Earth's past, wars, millions of soldiers fighting in muddy trenches, cities burning, mushroom clouds rising over devastated landscapes. "They call this World War," the Dralith explained. "They had 2 of them within 50 years. They killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. Not other species. Their own people. They did this to themselves." More images. Mass graves. Concentration camps. Children with hollow eyes and broken bodies. The assembly watched in horrified silence. "Violence is in their blood," the Dralith concluded. "It is not something they do. It is something they are. They cannot help themselves. If we do not guide them, if we do not control them, they will eventually turn this violence outward. They will bring destruction to us all." Captain Taiho stood in the observer gallery, his face like stone. Beside him, Lieutenant Yuno was trembling with barely contained rage. He placed a hand on her arm, a silent warning. She forced herself to be still. The prosecution continued for 3 more days. Species after species brought forward evidence of human violence, human ambition, human unpredictability. They showed recordings of human soldiers in combat, fighting with a ferocity that shocked the assembly. They showed human corporations expanding into new territories without permission. They showed human scientists experimenting with technologies that had been banned for thousands of years that by the 3rd day, the mood in the chamber had shifted completely. Even species that had previously been friendly to humanity were now looking at them with suspicion and fear. Back on the Endurance, Officer Beak-Hanna worked through the night, monitoring communications across the station. What she found made her stomach turn. "Captain," she reported to Taiho in his private quarters, "anti-human protests have begun on 3 stations. Several crews are refusing to dock anywhere near Earth vessels, and," she hesitated. "Continue," Taiho said. "There is talk of violence. Some groups are calling for direct action against human settlements. They say we need to be stopped before it is too late." Taiho absorbed this information calmly. "What about the vote? Have you learned anything about that?" Hannah's face fell. "Yes, Captain. I intercepted a private transmission between Delegate Kovan and several other elder species. The vote has already been decided. It was decided before we even arrived. This tribunal..." She struggled to find the words. "This tribunal is just theater. They are going to place us under guidance protocols, no matter what evidence we present." Taiho nodded slowly. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. "Does the ambassador know?" "I told her an hour ago. She is not taking it well." Taiho found Ambassador Lee in the small meeting room that had been assigned to the human delegation. She was sitting alone, staring at a datapad filled with legal arguments that would never be heard. "They have made their decision," she said without looking up. "Everything I have done, everything I have prepared, means nothing. They were never going to give us a fair hearing." "No," Taiho agreed. "They were not." Minji finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but beneath the exhaustion, there was still fire. "So what do we do? Surrender? Accept their chains? Become their pets? No. Then what? We cannot fight them. We are one species against thousands. Our fleet is strong, but not strong enough to win a war against the entire galaxy." Taiho sat down across from her. "When I was young," he said quietly, "my grandfather taught me to play a game called Biduk. Do you know it?" Minji frowned. "The board game? With the black and white stones?" "Yes, my grandfather was a master. He could beat anyone. But there was one lesson he taught me that I never forgot. He said that sometimes, when you are losing, the worst thing you can do is keep playing the same way. Sometimes you must change the game itself. And how do we do that? Taiho smiled faintly. I have been watching the elder species very carefully. They are afraid of us, not because we are strong, but because they do not understand us. They cannot predict what we will do, and that fear is their weakness. He leaned forward. On the final day of this tribunal, when they call for the vote, I will be allowed to speak. Military observers have the right to make one statement before judgment is rendered. They think it is a meaningless tradition. They expect me to beg for mercy or make empty threats. And what will you actually do? I will remind them of something they have forgotten. Something that will change everything. Minji studied him for a long moment. You are not going to tell me what it is, are you? No, not yet. You need to continue fighting as if victory is possible. The Assembly needs to see Earth's ambassador standing tall and unbroken. That is your role? And your role? Captain Taiho stood and walked toward the door. Before he left, he looked back at her one last time. My role is to make them afraid of the right things. He left her alone with those words. And Minji found herself, for the first time in days, feeling something other than despair. She felt hope. The final day of the tribunal arrived like a funeral. The grand chamber was more crowded than before. Species that had not bothered to attend the earlier sessions now filled every available seat. Word had spread across the galaxy that Earth would finally face judgment. Everyone wanted to witness the moment when humanity was brought to heel. Ambassador Li Minji stood on the platform with her delegation, her head held high. She had not slept in 2 days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But her voice remained strong as she delivered her final arguments. Humanity has made mistakes, she admitted to the Assembly. We have a violent past. We have hurt each other. We have sometimes acted without thinking. But that is not all we are. We are also capable of great compassion, great courage, great sacrifice. She paused, looking around the chamber. 3 years ago, when the holotide swept through the outer systems, humanity did not run. We stayed. We fought. We died. 32 Earthships were destroyed defending species that had never shown us kindness. Species that are now sitting in judgment of us. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but most remained unmoved. We are not asking for special treatment, Minji continued. We are only asking for the same rights that every other species enjoys. The right to grow. The right to protect ourselves. The right to be free. She bowed her head slightly. That is all I have to say. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then the High Arbiter spoke. The defense is concluded. Before the vote is taken, tradition allows one statement. From the military representative of the accused. Species. The Arbiter's crystalline. Voice carried a note of contempt. Captain. Kang Taiho of the Earth vessel. Endurance may speak. This was the moment. Captain Taiho rose from his seat in the observer gallery and began walking toward the central platform. The chamber watched him in silence. He was unarmed, dressed in the simple dark uniform of Earth's fleet. No medals, no decorations. Just a man dot as he walked. He felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon him. The Aetheri looked down from their high seats with cold amusement. The Veluxi sneered. The Dralith pulsed with colors that suggested mockery. They thought they knew what he would say. They expected begging, pleading, perhaps a desperate threat that would only prove their point about human violence. They were wrong. Taiho reached the platform and stood in the center, alone. He looked up at the assembled species slowly, meeting their eyes without flinching. For a long moment, he said nothing. The Arbiter's patience grew thin. You may speak. Be brief. Taiho nodded slightly. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady. It carried through the chamber without effort. You call us violent, he said. You say we are dangerous. You say we need guidance, control, supervision. You show images of all wars and tell each other that we are monsters. He paused. But I have a question for you. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. 3 years ago, when the holotide came, which species did you call for help? No one answered. It was not the Aetheri, Taiho continued. They have ruled their sector for 9,000 years. Their fleets are vast. Their technology is ancient and powerful. But when the darkness came, they pulled back to defend only themselves. He turned to look at another section of the chamber. It was not the Veluxi. Proud warriors, they call themselves. Masters of combat. But when the holotide reached the outer colonies, the Veluxi were nowhere to be found. Delegate Dreth's scales flushed with color, but he said nothing. It was not the Dralith. It was not the Corveni. It was not any of the elder species who now sit in judgment of us. Taiho's voice grew stronger. It was us. It was humanity. You sent your calls for help across every channel, and we were the only ones who answered. We sent our ships. We sent our soldiers. We sent our sons and daughters to die in a war that was not ours. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the Arbiter seemed frozen. 32 Earthships were destroyed. 14,000 human lives were lost. We held the line for 11 months while your civilians evacuated. We did not ask for payment. We did not ask for thanks. We did it because it was right. He looked up at the Aetheri section, directly at Delegate Corvan. And now you want to put us in chains? Now you want to take away our ships, our freedom, our future? After we bled for you? Taiho let the silence stretch. You call us violent. Maybe we are. But when the next great threat rises, and it will, ask yourselves this question. He spoke his next words slowly, making sure every being in the chamber heard them clearly. When that darkness comes, do you want humanity standing beside you as your guardians? Or do you want us standing against you as your enemies? The words hung in the air like thunder. Because I promise you this. If you vote to chain us today, we will remember. Humanity always remembers. And the next time your worlds burn and your people scream for help, you will call out to the stars, and no one will answer. He was not shouting. He was not threatening. He was simply stating a fact. And somehow, that made it more terrifying. You may try to bind Earth under your laws, but ask yourselves honestly, in your hearts, when the real enemy comes, who do you want fighting at your side? Captain Taiho stopped speaking. He stood in the center of the platform, alone, surrounded by thousands of aliens who had come to see humanity humbled. But no one was laughing now. No one was sneering. The Aetheri delegates were whispering among themselves, their silver faces troubled. The Veluxi looked uncertain. Even the Dralith had stopped pulsing their mocking colors. The High Arbiter was silent for a very long time. Then, slowly, it spoke. The vote will be delayed. The assembly requires time to deliberate. A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. This was unexpected. The vote had been scheduled. The outcome had been certain. But something had changed. Captain Taiho bowed slightly to the Arbiter and turned to walk back to his position. As he passed Ambassador Lee, she reached out and gripped his arm. What did you just do? She whispered. Taiho looked at her, and for the first time in days, there was a light in his eyes. I reminded them who we are. The days that followed Captain Taiho's speech were unlike anything the Galactic Assembly had seen in centuries. The vote was delayed once, then delayed again. Behind closed doors, species that had been eager to put humanity in chains were now having second thoughts. The recordings of Taiho's words spread across every network in the galaxy. Billions of beings watched the human captain stand alone before the mightiest powers in existence and speak without fear. Some called it arrogance. Others called it courage. But everyone, whether they liked it or not, was talking about it. On the Endurance, Lieutenant Park Yuna monitored the situation with growing amazement. Communications traffic about humanity had increased by over 300%. News networks were debating the speech endlessly. Commentators argued about whether Taiho's words had been a threat or a promise. They cannot decide if they should be angry or afraid, Yuna reported to the captain. Good, Taiho replied. Confused enemies make mistakes. On the third day after the speech, something unexpected happened. A message arrived from Delegate Kovan of the Ethery. He requested a private meeting with Captain Taiho, not with Ambassador Lee, not with the full delegation. Just the captain. Taiho agreed. They met in a small chamber near the docking area. It was a neutral space, designed for sensitive conversations. Corin stood waiting when Taiho arrived. The Ethery delegate was tall and elegant, his silver robes flowing around him. But his eyes showed something that had not been there before. Uncertainty. Captain Kang, Korvan said. Thank you for meeting with me. Taiho nodded but said nothing. Your speech was effective, Korvan continued. I will not pretend otherwise. You have caused considerable disruption to plans that were years in the making. Plans to enslave my species, Taiho said calmly. Plans to protect the galaxy from a potential threat, Korvan corrected. But his voice lacked conviction. Silence stretched between them. I have lived for 4,000 years, Korvan said finally. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species burn themselves to extinction and others lift themselves to greatness. In all that time, I thought I understood the patterns of the universe. He paused. But I do not understand humanity. What is there to understand? Taiho asked. We are not complicated. We fight for those we care about. We protect what matters to us. We do not abandon our friends. That is exactly what I do not understand. Korvan's voice carried genuine confusion. During the Holotide War, you had nothing to gain by helping. The outer colonies that were threatened belonged to species that had never shown you kindness. Some of them had actively opposed your membership in the galactic community. And yet, you still came. Yes. Why? Taiho considered the question for a long moment. Because they needed help, he said simply. Because they were dying. Because we could do something about it. That is reason enough. Kovan stared at him as if he were speaking an alien language. My species would not have done the same. If there was nothing to gain, we would not have risked our ships, our people. I know, Taiho said. That is why you called us instead. The words hit home. Kovan looked away. I am going to withdraw my proposal for guidance protocols, he said quietly. Not because I am afraid of your threat, but because, he struggled to find the words, because I am beginning to think we may have misjudged you. Perhaps what we call violence is actually something else. Something we do not have a name for. We have a name for it, Taiho said. We call it heart. The meeting lasted 4 hours. No one else knew what was said during that time. But when Korvan emerged, he walked directly to the Grand Chamber and formally withdrew his proposal. His speech was brief. I have reconsidered my position. Humanity may be young, and they may be different from us. But perhaps that is not a weakness. Perhaps it is something we need. One by one, other species followed his lead. The Veluxi withdrew their support for the guidance protocols. The Dralith issued a statement acknowledging humanity's contributions during the Holotide War. Smaller species that had been afraid to speak began voicing their own support. The tide had turned. 3 weeks after the tribunal began, The High Arbiter finally announced the Assembly's decision. The charges against Earth were suspended pending further review. The Universal Compliance Accord would be amended. Humanity would no longer be classified as a developing species under observation. Instead, they would be recognized as a sovereign ally with full rights and responsibilities. The Grand Chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. A few walked out in protest. But the decision stood. Earth was free. That evening, the crew of the Endurance gathered in the ship's common area for a quiet celebration. There were no speeches, no grand ceremonies, just tired people sharing drinks and allowing themselves to feel relief. Lieutenant Yuna found Captain Taiho standing alone near a viewport, looking out at the stars. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "We did it," Taiho corrected. "All of us. Every human who served during the Holotide. Every life that was lost. They are the reason the galaxy listened." Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her for days. "What did you say to Korvan?" "In that private meeting?" Taiho smiled faintly. "I reminded him that the ethery homeworld has no orbital defenses. That their fleet is spread across 1,000 systems. That if humanity ever decided to become their enemy instead of their friend, they would be completely vulnerable." Yuna's eyes widened. "You threatened him?" "No, I told him the truth. And then I told him something else." Taiho's smile faded. "I told him that we would never attack his world. That we would never harm his people. That even if the ethery voted to chain us, we would not seek revenge. Why? Because that is not who we are." Taiho turned to look at her. That is what he could not understand. He expected us to be like every other species he has known. He expected us to be selfish, calculating, interested only in our own survival. He could not imagine a species that would sacrifice itself for strangers. And when you showed him that we would, it frightened him more than any threat ever could. Ambassador Li Minji appeared at the doorway. She looked exhausted but satisfied. "Captain, the Assembly has granted us departure clearance. We can leave whenever you are ready." Taiho nodded. "Tell the crew to prepare for launch." We go home. An hour later, the Endurance broke free from the station and turned toward the stars. As the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, Taiho stood on the bridge, watching the Assembly world shrink behind them. He thought about everything that had happened. The accusations, the fear, the moment when he had stood alone before the mightiest powers in the galaxy and spoken the truth. Earth would face other challenges, other enemies, other trials. But for now, they had one. They had proven that humanity was more than violence and ambition. They were courage. They were loyalty. They were heart, and the galaxy would never forget it. Course laid in. "Captain," Yuna reported. Taiho took one last look at the stars. "Take us home." The Endurance jumped to hyperspace, carrying the future with it.